Good morning, and welcome to Accelerating Sustainable Warehouse Innovations webinar. When Prologis customers ask us questions about sustainability, the two questions that most often come up are, how are we going to do it? And do we have enough time to get it all done? To help answer those questions, today we're going to focus on emerging solutions that will help us scale the energy supply faster than ever, address hard to decarbonize sources like building materials, and promote sustainability co-benefits like circularity and wellness. We are also excited to hear from you. I have no doubt that we have a unique blend of backgrounds and sustainability talent in the audience. As we speak, poll questions will appear on the right-hand side. Please answer these questions so we can steer the conversation towards what you're most interested in and also learn a bit from you as well. We'll also have Q&A at the end of the panel discussion, so please ask any questions in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side. And for your reviewing and sharing convenience following this webinar, a recording will be available on demand. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your time. Starting with Andy Lee, could you please introduce yourself, your role in your organization, and briefly describe your company's sustainability goals or objectives and how they pertain to this conversation today?
Great, thank you, Sam. My name is Andy Lee. I lead our sustainable development initiatives at Amazon Global Realty. Global Realty is our real estate company that services our fulfillment and logistics network. So simply put, this is any facility where a package flows through. And my work at Amazon has focused on development of decarbonization standards for our network, our ops facilities, and working on development partnerships. Related to the goals that apply today, Amazon has taken a number of public goals. The two that I'd like to highlight that I think are most pertinent to this conversation are the first one is Climate Pledge, and the second one is 100% renewable energy. So Climate Pledge is our commitment as a company to be net zero emissions by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. And it means that we are committing to regular reporting, carbon elimination, and the use of credible offsets to reach that net zero emissions target. 100% renewable energy, this is a goal that we actually originally set for 2030. We moved that goal up to 2025, and we have achieved it for the first time in 2023. So this commitment to be 100% of our electricity as renewable energy, and Amazon has already become the #1 procurer of renewable energy in the world for the 4th year in a row. So we're excited to talk about those two goals and how it applies. Thank you.
Lindsay, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Baker. I'm the CEO of Living Future. We're a nonprofit organization that works to decarbonize, detoxify, and generally make the built environment of our world resilient and regenerative. And we've been working with Prologis, with Amazon, and with a lot of companies around the world to essentially do that work tactically, primarily through a program we're going to talk about a little bit more today, our zero carbon certification program. But really, we're a team of building scientists and experts, supply chain specialists, and people who work on what it means to decarbonize this incredibly complex but also critical sector of our economy. So as it relates to the goals for today, this is very much the space that we work in, and what we're motivated to help companies with around the world is how can we make this transition in a way that works for business, but also fundamentally works for our planet. So thanks for having me. Excited for the conversation.
Jesse, you're up next.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Jesse Simons. I'm a co-founder and chief commercial officer here at SolarCycle, where we've launched the most advanced solar recycling platform in the world that's capable of extracting over 95% of the valuable materials that you find in a solar panel. And right here, you can see the solar metal and glass that are coming right off of our factory lines across the way here in Odessa, Texas. Prior to launching SolarCycle, I spent 20 years working at the Sierra Club, where I led our efforts in climate change and clean energy. And what inspired me to leave Sierra Club and start this company was that the world is soon going to have 10 billion panels installed. That's more panels than people, and that is going to be hundreds of millions of panels retiring every year globally and tens of millions here in the US in the next 5 to 10 years, which is a challenge, but is also a massive opportunity in terms of capturing all the silver and silicon and copper that's in here, taking this glass and turning it into new glass sheets that we can sell to people who are onshoring their manufacturing. And fundamentally, our vision is to mine and refine old solar panels wherever in the world they were made in the first place and turn them into new solar panels made here in America with 100% recycled content. And while we do have our own internal goals in terms of zero waste and zero carbon, we're a pretty small company. We're a startup funded by Prologis, by Microsoft, by others. And so I think my role on this call is better to share with you how we can support you in achieving your circularity goals and your climate goals. So really excited to be here and share what we've been learning over the last couple of years running this company. Thanks.
And last, one of our own, Ray Oakley.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Ray Oakley. I'm an investment manager for the Prologis Ventures team based in San Francisco. The Ventures team is this corporate venture capital arm of Prologis, which invests in early stage technologies across logistics and the real estate value chain. And my role on the team is to focus on the net zero technologies that will help us and our customers meet our sustainability goals. And so Prologis has a goal to reach net zero across all 3 scopes by 2040, with some pretty fundamental interim goals that will help us stay on track. The first of which is we hope to meet net zero across our scopes 1 and 2 by 2030. We also are on track to be carbon neutral in our construction by 2025. And most excitingly, we are on track to deploy 1 gigawatt worth of solar capacity by the end of 2025. So I will be contributing to the discussion my perspective on what an owner, operator, and developer can do to help decarbonize the built world. It's great to be with you.
Awesome. Thank you all. Now let's lay out some of the key challenges we're all working towards together to address. The United States must increase electricity generation 2 times by 2050 in order to meet rising energy demand and at a rate over 2 times faster than what we've achieved historically. And we must do so in a clean way to incorporate corporate and public net zero targets and state renewable portfolio standards. So within this context, a wider array of on-site energy technologies is emerging, and a wider number of our customers and our tenants are asking us the when and the how of implementing them. When it comes to sustainable building innovation, we're seeing the following optimistic trends. In addition to seeing more CSOs being hired, more public commitments to decarbonization, we're also seeing more public corporate commitments to investments in sustainable technology, like Prologis is doing through our Ventures program, as Ray mentioned. For example, Amazon's $2 billion Climate Pledge Fund, Microsoft's $1 billion Climate Innovation Fund. And in addition to making corporate ambitious commitments to sustainability goals, organizations are also using sustainability as a key supply chain resiliency planning and investment driver. For example, Unilever's regenerative agricultural practices aim to promote a more stable food supply chain. And we're also starting to make progress on a number of key pain points we must address, including how do we bring down the price point and increase availability of carbon removals, low carbon concrete, and other critical solutions. So when we think about industrial real estate specifically, which solutions are we most focused on? If you're constructing a building, you have the opportunity to lower emissions embodied in the building materials. These are not insignificant and can often make up over a quarter of the total building life cycle emissions. Our focus in this area is identifying concrete and steel volume reductions or incorporating alternative or recycled materials that also save cost. In some geographies and projects, we've been able to reduce building emissions by over 10% while still saving cost. Once the building is built, there's a common combination of solutions that can drive a really, really large impact very quickly, including solar, power purchase agreements, transportation electrification, and heating electrification. These are the 4 things you absolutely have to do to fully decarbonize a warehouse. when other operational objectives are also a top priority, like cost reduction, operational resilience, or employee health and safety, other solutions come into the picture, like energy monitoring, microgrids, battery storage, or air filtration. I personally love unpacking an organization's objectives to find the right combination of solutions, and that is what we'll focus on in our panel today. So the first question, turning things over to our panelist, is for Lindsay. What are the major benefits that sustainability initiatives can bring to corporate operations?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So I usually like to start with the fundamentals of why I do this work and why I know a lot of us do, which is that our planet has constraints. It has boundaries that we basically have to operate within in order to maintain our systems and our economy. Sorry, I hope the connection's okay. It's giving me a poor connection sign, but fingers crossed. So for me, I think that's a good place to start. We are fundamentally trying to
I think we lost Lindsay. So Andy, I'm gonna throw that question at you, which is where I was headed next. What are the major benefits?
To show that we are a part of a business community that is working within these constraints, that knows how to build and knows how to operate in a sustainable way. That part is critical, and we've shown in the business world that we are capable of this. More and more leading companies are really doing this work and making sure that folks can tell that leading companies are capable of working towards climate action and hitting our collective Paris Agreement goals. But the final one is that it is, of course, a really great way to distinguish business and to help it be, to show your clients, to show your community, the political landscape that you work within, that climate is important to you and that sustainability is important to you in your business. It's a values thing, and it matters a lot to many people.
Awesome, love that. Andy, same question to you. What major benefits is sustainability bringing to Amazon's operations?
Right. I'll start with just the thought that really sustainability is our opportunity to connect with our customers. Amazon aspires to be the world's most customer-centric company, and what that means is we welcome the accountability that comes along with aligning with our customers' principles when it relates to sustainability and reaching climate targets, and being very transparent and rigorous about how we go about that work to really validate the principles of our customers. Now, my direct customers are the businesses within Amazon's operations, so the fulfillment and logistics businesses. And what do they care about? Well, they care about speed, cost, and business resilience. So when I'm presenting sustainability initiatives, it is really through that lens of, how can I help improve operations? How can I help reduce expenses, create facilities that are lighter and faster to build, and give my businesses opportunities to more positively engage with the communities where they operate? So it really is about building that connection between, our business and our customer.
And staying on Andy for a second, what are the most significant challenges in decarbonizing large-scale industrial buildings, and how are you addressing those challenges?
Oh, that's a great question, Sam. There are many. The two that I'd really highlight are around scale and data. I think it's worth noting that Amazon operates in over 20 countries with thousands of facilities worldwide. So, my challenge is thinking about how are we delivering on climate pledge targets at the individual site level and also at the portfolio level. Big thing we do with scale is start by just having a clear definition of what low carbon design looks like, being really clear about that with our businesses and with our external partners where we who develop facilities with us. And then a great way to be very specific about that is through the use of design standards. It's something we deploy globally. I work on the decarbonization side of those standards, and it's important to use those kind of performance-driven targets at the system level so that we can acknowledge that there's a lot of variance regionally in how design and procurement practices work. And then, pairing with procurement, a really robust procurement strategy is also critical in addressing scale, because we have to do a bunch of due diligence to make sure that anytime we're suggesting an initiative or a design feature, we have options regionally, and a strong supplier network to deliver that. I'll just touch quickly on data, because that's such, Amazon is a very data-driven company, and we really, we consider that as like critical information for us to make decisions. So it's the use of modeling. We do a lot of carbon modeling, using life cycle assessment, energy modeling, AI to do predictions across our portfolio. We gather insights from our construction teams and our suppliers, where materials are available, what factors into cost, and then we invest in actuals. And this is actually where, even the Living Future Institute has been really helpful, using their programs like Zero Carbon, where we can have a robust framework for pulling together metering data, product level material data, so we can really validate that our models are right and we're actually achieving what we said we would. So just some quick resources. There's a project called SCA5. It's a same-day delivery site in Sacramento that actually just achieved zero carbon certification this year. It's a great example of when all those design standards and data validation comes together into one project. So I definitely encourage you all to check that out and the features there. And then Amazon has recently posted this resource called the Sustainability Exchange, which is a public playbook or guide that goes through those actions you can take and the way you can measure progress. So again, kind of revealing a little bit about how we think about zero carbon and the ways we measure.
Great. Ray, I'd love to hear from you on the challenges in scaling low carbon building materials for industrial properties and how the industry can overcome them.
Yeah, so when it comes to materials, the physical component of our building, important context. When you think about a warehouse, you have to keep in mind that we use predominantly two very carbon intensive materials: concrete, which ultimately a lot of the carbon emissions come from the cement in that concrete, and then steel. And so we have this large chunk that we could focus on, and then we also have a very long tail of additional opportunities. And so when I think about how Prologis and how real estate owners, anyone who's looking to construct anything, should be thinking about decarbonization, it's both these large, innovative, needle-moving opportunities coupled with incremental moves. What are the small changes that we can do today to just keep us moving towards our goal? And so the specific challenges that we face as a developer are very straightforward: cost and risk. How are we going to manage the upfront premium that comes with a low carbon, typically smaller scale because it hasn't reached that high scale yet, green material? Then there are the risk contingencies that our value chain bakes in and compounds across the value chain. And lastly, the potential for a schedule increase, which can have additionally compounding effects on the cost and the risk that we run as a developer. And there are also some challenges from the startup's perspective. I really don't want to diminish how important it is that they have assistance in meeting some of their challenges too. Primarily for us, and scale is amazing, but startups usually start in one place and then grow from that location. So as you think about the lumpiness of demand versus the availability of supply, there's a mismatch that happens there. And that can be even more challenging as startups try and build their first of a kind plants, and they need to show financing institutions that they have strong demand at the other end. So securing these offtake agreements with that lumpiness of demand is very difficult. Not to mention real estate is a cyclical industry, so even getting the offtake in the first place can be very challenging. So just some easy challenges to think through. No, just kidding. These are huge, huge problems that we need to work through as an industry. And I'm really glad to be discussing this with folks across the value chain today, because when I think about overcoming them, there are, of course, things that we can do to focus on actual material efficiency or some sort of schedule improvement. Adding some performance benefit really gets people interested, but it's where you go from there, how you get partners involved. Andy already talked about setting up a strong supplier network in certain areas to get things off the ground. I think really focusing on the fact that the rising tide will raise all boats here, will get us a lot further than if we just try and go at it alone and do things without that network effect in mind. And so when, again, it comes to balancing that incremental versus large scale innovation, I think having the right partners with you with aligned incentives is one of the best ways to help overcome those challenges.
I love that collaborative spirit. I'm all for it. As a follow-up, Ray, what kind of low carbon technologies are you most excited about that you think are going to shape the futures of logistics real estate?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked. This is my opportunity to totally geek out. I love this stuff. And the framework that I usually start with is we can use better materials and we can use less carbon intensive materials. And so when it comes to better materials or systems, a lot of what I'm seeing today actually has to do with conditioning and cooling warehouse spaces. So I've come across companies that use films on our roofs that can use radiative cooling to passively cool the building down, sometimes up to 10 degrees Celsius from ambient air temperatures. I've also seen paints that can have a directional vapor control that allow you to pull moisture out of a building and keep it out to keep it cooler on the inside. And I've seen really great innovative HVAC technology like liquid desiccants that again use passive cooling technologies to help reduce energy loads on buildings, sometimes up to 50% in those very humid climates like where my Southeast Americans at. I know how the real feel can feel very different from the actual temperature when it's really humid out. So that's about using better materials or systems. And then when it comes to using less materials and systems, I love to highlight ways that we can just use less concrete or less steel or less pavement, right? And there's a lot we can do with fiber reinforcements. We have a really great project in the East Bay that just thinned out our slab by 30% because we incorporated steel type 1 fibers into the concrete mix, which has that ability to deliver the same performance and strength requirements as a 9-inch slab, but only with 6 inches in those steel fibers. I've also seen asphalt coatings and reinforcements that help extend the lifetime of pavements, which is a huge boost for our customers who don't have to wait for a truck court to get repaved. And then there are just a number of really interesting waste streams that are now being reincorporated and upcycled. I mean, Jesse's a perfect example of that. He's building an entire business off of it. And I get really excited about those waste streams and how we can think about a more circular economy. And last thing that I think as a developer, we should be looking at are tools that help us optimize design, right? There are a number of situations where we might just over-engineer or use an additional column here or there because it's I'll just say a little bit easier to do that than have to go through the work of redesigning something. So what are the tools that we can use that highlight those opportunities for us to have a very efficient design?
Great. And Jesse, that was a nice cue for you. Solar Cycle is a Prologis Ventures funded startup focusing on recycling solar panels. How is solar recycling contributing to the circular economy, and how can logistics companies leverage this concept to improve their sustainability efforts?
Yeah, so on the first question, in terms of how solar recycling can contribute, let me pull the lens back for a second and cite a study from the International Energy Agency that found that to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, we would need to quadruple the demand of transition minerals for clean energy production by 2040. That's 4 times more. That's way faster than energy growth or anything else. And one example within the solar industry of this is silver. This is something that blew my mind when I first started this company, was that solar panels currently consume 15% of all the silver on the planet right now, heading towards 20% within the next couple of years. And if we keep on the trajectory we're going and we don't figure out how to close the loop, it'll be at 100% of all silver within 15 years, and that's totally unsustainable. So that gives you a sense of like the challenge in front of us. The good news is that the National Renewable Energy Laboratory studied this question and determined that here in the US, recycling solar panels and mining and refining them for new materials, such as this solar metal here and this solar glass, that could provide 30 to 50% of the total 2030 demand we have for building solar panels in this country. And the thing that really excites me is that at some point, it can be 100% of our demand, because solar panels and batteries, these are some of the most recyclable appliances ever designed, right? Particularly solar panels, it's just glass and metals basically. And while you lose some of the materials every time you recycle, that is more than made up for by the increases in efficiency. So when we recycle a panel, we'll get 95% out. But the panel from 10 years ago compared to today, it's like 3 to 4 times more efficient, and that's going to continue to be true. And that has a huge impact on climate. I'm happy to get into it later, but I know most folks, as they're looking at ESG, that's one of the key things they're looking at. And the World Bank found that the aluminum in solar panels is one of the biggest drivers of climate change from the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. And so just by recycling those, you can offset all the other impacts from things like lithium and graphite and everything else. And then in terms of how this fits with logistics companies and what you all can do here, I mean, I think Prologis and Amazon are definitely showing the way by putting so much solar on all of their buildings. And then the next step, and we're already in conversations with Prologis on this, since they're an investor in our company, is starting to talk about end of life and working on how do you do that on the front end as you're developing a new building, as you're buying a new building or leasing a new building. How do you make sure that your solar developer is including recycling as they're developing the project, right? Think about what's going to happen at the end, pre-fund it. If you're doing power purchase agreements as part of this, make sure that whoever's doing that for you has recycling built in. And then similarly, if you're buying your own panels, make sure that you're thinking about, is there a pre-funding mechanism to ensure they get recycled? We just announced a big deal with Canadian Solar, one of the largest solar panel makers in the world, where they're going to offer a recycling product with every panel they sell. This is a huge, simple way of basically making sure that when you're buying renewable energy, you're ensuring that the technology itself becomes renewable. So I'll stop there, but hopefully that answered your question.
It did and more. Jesse, staying with you for a second and thinking more broadly about the solar industry, how do you see solar energy evolving over the next decade, especially in industrial real estate? And what role will recycling play in ensuring the sustainability of those panels as we see this massive expansion, which you already touched a bit on?
Yeah, well, I'm sure most of the people on this call know that globally solar is already dominating new installs around the world, and it's set to surpass coal in the next couple of years. Here in the US, commercial industrial solar is expected to rise somewhere in the range of 6 to 10% a year, depending on the reports you choose to believe. All these reports, in my experience, have always been pretty conservative, so I think we can expect at least a 10% growth rate on commercial solar. And I'd say, you know, in terms of trends, I think there's a lot more room for these big box buildings to have more solar from the start. And I believe that commercial industrial is going to be a really big growth area for solar, particularly because these solar projects tend to be close to load, and it therefore makes a lot more sense to install solar there than it does, you know, out in the desert or other places. You're going to need to do both, but I think these opportunities to put a lot of panels on a roof in a urban-ish setting, ex-urban setting, really great opportunity for solar development. And then I'd say that, you know, as these projects are getting built, as I was saying earlier, it's just key to make sure that you're planning for the end of life on the front end and that you get it contracted and secured on the front end. The other thing I'll say is one trend I see is that repowering of older solar assets, I think, is going to hit commercial industrial before it hits residential or utility scale. And that's just because every watt you can generate per meter really matters in this setting. And a lot of these projects that were built in the 2010s, you know, these had 250 watt panels, and now you can get a 700 watt panel. Maybe not on a commercial industrial, it's 500 or 600 watts. But we're getting to this moment, not today, maybe not even next year, but within the next year or two, we believe there's going to be a lot of repowering of commercial industrial projects that are only, you know, 15 years old. And that's where recycling really can come in and help provide a solution so that those panels don't end up in a landfill, but end up being recycled and turned back into the next wave of solar panels.
Awesome. Andy, over to you as we pivot from materials and waste to energy efficiency and renewable energy for buildings. How is Amazon integrating sustainability into its warehouse operations, particularly when it comes to energy specifically and to carbon emissions?
Right. Well, I think I'll speak to some of the big gains we're making, particularly in our newer facilities. It's really centered around electrification of our buildings, our transportation, and including the incorporation of clean energy. So, certainly my team focuses a lot on the building itself and the electrification of the heating and cooling systems, and that has to be paired with efficiency measures so that we can preserve our energy capacity that we have on the site for evolving operations. So it is very much about like working with our suppliers to identify the most efficient products and pairing that with a really robust control strategy to make sure that we're using them as efficiently as we can. EVs or electric vehicles, electric trucks, this is something that is certainly growing within our network, and our real estate is our connection point, right? That's where they charge. We already have over 17,000 delivery vans, electric delivery vans on the road. They've delivered over 800 million packages to date. And these are over about 120 sites. So it's really important that like as we're kind of building out our network, we're building out that infrastructure for our transportation network. And likewise, renewable energy. I mentioned we're the largest procurer of renewable energy in the world. We also have over 250 facilities that have it on site, and that includes our logistics and fulfillment facilities. So it really is an important component of putting that infrastructure together, is putting generation with our use. On the other side of emissions, I think Ray did an awesome job of discussing all the opportunities we have in Scope 3. All the new technologies are coming out. Certainly, low carbon steel and concrete is a big focus, and that is just by the nature of representing such a large piece of a warehouse type project. So, again, I'll just reiterate that like being close to our suppliers and having good relationships with our supply chain is just so essential, and even getting to the level where we understand their decarbonization plans, because we're going to be marching together towards those goals. It is worth noting that we have our own investment fund, Climate Pledge Fund. That's a $2 billion fund to invest in kind of companies that have products or services that facilitate that transition to a clean energy economy or low carbon economy, and that spreads across lots of eight different sectors. And that's everything from clean energy, low carbon materials, hydrogen, batteries, packaging, you name it. And I think that those are really great opportunities for us to work with our own kind of investors and funders and see like where do those have application within our facilities? Where can we test? Where can we do limited use of these new technologies? So very exciting space. And then I think the last thing I'll note that I'm particularly excited about is the partnerships we have through buyers alliances. 2023, Amazon took a role in being a founding member of the Zero Emissions Maritime Buyers Alliance, ZEMBA. So that's like basically fuel for ships and boats, and the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance, SABA. And this year, we joined the Sustainable Steel Buyers Alliance. So these are just examples of how we can, knowing that we're a large company, we have a lot of facilities, but we're not big enough to drive these whole materials. So it is important that we partner up and work with other companies, work with other organizations to provide that kind of durable demand signal. So that they can make investments, in new technologies.
Awesome. And I want to quickly jump to Lindsay while we have the opportunity to engage her. Lindsay is at Greenbuild in the trenches this week doing some awesome problem solving and having connection issues. But Lindsay wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on the role of third-party certifications like zero carbon and living building influencing the logistics real estate market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so sorry, everyone. What a nightmare just trying to get all the systems to work. But hopefully I'm back again. And yeah, I mean, so we are trying to really support this movement to change the way that we build and maintain our buildings through verification. Certification, I think, sometimes it sounds kind of like getting a gold star for your work, and no one really needs that. But what we do and what we really try to make sure we're there for is to verify and check to make sure that really the systems were installed the way that they were intended to, and that you have a tool if you are working on a project that says we're trying to make sure that this building really checks out, that the project that we do, that the operations that we've executed are really followed through on, and that we can say something that a third-party organization has come in and taken a look at everything we've done and can say, yes, absolutely. Because I think sustainability these days, there are still a lot of questions that are sometimes hard for people to get their heads around. There are genuine mistakes that happen along the way, or you try to procure something, you can't quite procure it, and things get lost. And so having that role on the team of a third-party certifier to make sure that you're really holding yourselves accountable for the goals that you set has proven to be just a really useful infrastructure for a lot of folks who are working on these kinds of projects. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. One of the fun and interesting and difficult parts of the job is to maintain essentially alignment of our programs, like the Zero Carbon program, with this growing world of carbon accounting, which is pretty, can be kind of difficult to wade through at times. And so our job, more or less, is to try to help folks who are working in the building industry to make sure that you have kind of a simplified version of what that means for you and for your project, so that you know that you're really taking into account all the things that we understand you need to be paying attention to, and that there's sort of that, it's a little bit of a cheat sheet to say, this is your scope, this is what you need to focus on, where you need to reduce, like Sam's first slide there. It really helps to just break it down and make it kind of easy to understand. So yeah, those are some of the reasons that we show up and why we try to be a part of the process, and hopefully it's useful as just infrastructure to encourage people along the way as well.
Extremely useful. I'm very excited that we're partnering with Living Futures, and very grateful that this certification system exists to be able to provide a North Star for taking a lot of these actions. So thank you. Ray, last question here. What role can AI play in optimizing warehouse energy use and sustainability?
It wouldn't be a VC conversation if we didn't talk about AI. Well, I don't know if you guys could see this, but the lights just went on and off in my conference room because I guess I've been sitting so still, which is a perfect example of how technology can optimize energy use. But no, to actually answer the question, I think of AI as a tool in our toolkit that helps enable action. I think any real estate owner out there knows we have to put solar on our roofs, knows we should electrify our HVAC. Like, we all know fundamentally that this is what needs to happen, but how do we actually get there? And so there are two core components that AI can help with that will sequentially get us to that vision of, okay, I have a building, I know exactly what needs to happen first, and I know how I'm going to plan for it. So first is digitization. I think most industrial asset owners historically don't have granular equipment level data information, and even sometimes building information. And so AI and large models can help us approximate with a very high level of confidence what is in our building, how old are those systems, how effectively are they operating? And so this gives us a better view of our operating portfolio, and couple that with physics-based modeling and synthesis, you can start to get a really productive path towards what is this building, how is it performing, and how can we see that adapting in the future. And then from there, data management is also a big component that I think AI helps with. So AI is very good at taking large amounts of data and then very quickly identifying what are the options that you have for improvement. So we're seeing a growing set of tools that help surface these data, actionable insights, and then help us better manage things like gas, water, electricity. And so this can include everything from energy efficiency insights, or optimizing maintenance schedules, or even improved capital planning. And to really summarize this question, I think the most important thing I'd love to leave you all with is that warehouses historically have been on the lower end of the higher and best use spectrum. And as we think about the ways that real estate can serve as a platform for the energy transition, you start to see that higher and best use scale like inching up further and further. And as the supply chain becomes more and more relevant for e-commerce and all these different types of delivery mechanisms, you start to see a lot more of value, I think, coming from the data from our buildings. And AI, I think, is a really, really great path to help us get to those actionable insights quickly.
Awesome. Thank you for answering the AI question. So now looking at some of the poll results, according to our poll, 35% of our audience reported high initial costs as the major challenge when considering sustainable solutions for your organization. Panelists, do you find this surprising? And would anyone like to comment further?
I'm happy to chime in. I don't find it surprising because it definitely sounds like that thing that we all kind of know we're up against. Honestly, when we're trying anything new, there's a basic learning curve to doing something a different way. I'm hoping actually maybe Abby can share a little bit of stories of this in terms of what it means of what that really looks like in practice once your organization is doing the work in that new way. Because I suspect that a lot of that really, and this is what we see anyway with our clients, but I think it might be better to hear from you guys. What that actually ends up feeling like once this is how you build, once this becomes the standard practice. But that kind of change can always be a little bit of a transition for anyone. I think that the real question is, does it actually have to be that much more expensive up front, or is it a question of changing sort of your assumptions about what these things should cost, but also sort of how it gets amortized over time, all those kinds of questions. So in my experience, not surprising that would be the answer, but certainly a hurdle that many have overcome and we can.
I'll add to that as well. It's not surprising to me at all. It's kind of the struggle, we all live and breathe all the time, is how do we bring the price point down of these solutions? I think the piece of advice that I'll offer is to not accept that as fixed, because I find that often when you dig into the complexity, there is a solution, there is something you can change, or market dynamics change quickly enough where you're able to find a source of subsidization, prices change. So I think the important thing is to constantly be monitoring costs, monitoring prices, and trying new things because solutions do eventually emerge.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I too am not surprised, and I actually think Ray, you brought up some really great points that address this, because I feel like when we talk about that lower carbon solutions are more costly, we're really just focusing on technology deployments. And I think part of what I certainly try to drive with my internal business customers is like low carbon design can, in many cases, means leaner design. So the ways we can use less material, the ways we can make our structure more efficient, the ways we can find ways to simplify assemblies. Any of these things that get us to using the materials and the systems we have more effectively, rather than just simply trying to do upgrades and add more. Ray, you brought up a brilliant example, the steel fiber reinforced concrete, which allows you to go from I think you said, a 9-inch slab to a 6-inch slab. It's a perfect example of pursuing a technology that allows you to downsize or to be lighter weight. So I think that, and certainly like when I go to my businesses with solutions, those are the ones they get most excited about, right? So that's what wakes me up, not just like the latest whiz bang, technology.
Well, one other thing I'll add is, solar power itself, right, has dropped 90% in cost over the last decade. And when I was working at Sierra Club on clean energy, we were always like, how do we get to grid parity where solar could compete directly head to head with gas and coal? And now we're there, we're actually below that. And so it isn't a static thing, but it does require scale, it does require leadership. And I think companies like Prologis and Amazon, others, were willing on solar to pay a little bit more to meet the goals that would help save the planet. And I think we're in a moment like that in a lot of things, whether it's green steel, concrete, And in our case, recycling, it is companies like Amazon making a commitment to recycle their clean energy, well, not just clean energy, but a lot of different things. Microsoft has made a similar commitment, and ultimately being willing to pay a little bit more for that early on will allow us in the circular economy space to scale this to the point where we can reach what we call landfill parity, where it basically is a no-brainer to recycle rather than landfill, because it's cheaper, because we're getting so good at extracting those materials and returning to the supply chain. But it does take some early leadership from companies and investments and other things like that. But I do believe that a lot of these things, once they scale, are actually cheaper. It's how do you get over that initial catch-22, and I think it takes leadership from big companies and governments.
Awesome, could not agree more. We're going to move over into the question or the Q&A session of this panel. The first question is general question for any panelist who wants to answer. Many decarbonization efforts rely on solar farms that are off-site. How do you see this off-site source of renewables or solar playing a role as well? And I can start, and then if anyone, feel free to jump in. So when I'm engaging with a lot of our customers in building out their roadmap to net zero or decarbonization roadmap, those offsite sources often play a really important short-term role. Because if you're flexible to incorporate those offsite sources, you can often get to a lower price point, which can help you to overcome potentially that cost challenge if you're in a market that's not particularly favorable. And so a lot of what I see is customers will purchase these big VPPAs to cover their entire portfolio and then begin to attack on-site solar one by one as they have bandwidth or as it becomes attractive in that market, with the goal of maximizing on-site solar as much as possible to increase their additionality or impact according to what their impact principles are as an organization. So I think it plays a really important role, and I would not shy away from it. I would think about it as a multi-pronged strategy.
For sure. Real quickly, our goal to get to 1 gigawatt by the end of 2025, that's a nuclear power plant's worth of energy production, and that's on, I think, less than 10% of our roof coverage. So wow. If we think back to this, like incremental versus large scale efforts, adding solar panels onto roofs really adds up. It really does. And this was actually what drew me to Prologis when the CEO came to one of my real estate classes as a grad student. He was like, what do you know about a warehouse? It's got a big flat roof, no other tall buildings around it. Perfect for solar panels. Similarly, trucks hang out at it all day. So you can just charge your truck while it's getting loaded and unloaded. And I just thought this was such a practical approach to decarbonization that solved a lot of challenges. So I think that both the big solar farms and C&I deployments both play a role.
And the next question, go ahead.
I'll just add really quickly that we are seeing in those bigger projects that permitting issues are becoming more challenging. So the fact, Ray, that 90% of your rooftops don't have solar on it yet, that is a lot easier to permit and get going, and obviously better for communities and the environment the closer it is to load. I support all solar, but that is a really exciting opportunity. I bet you fly across the country, you look down, most roofs still don't have solar. So you want both, but I really love the idea of doubling down on these C&I projects, particularly given some of the challenges that come with these much larger projects.
Awesome. So Jesse, the next question was directed at you. What do you do with antimony and PFAS that is in the panels that you recycle?
Yeah, so with the antimony, that is a semi-hazardous material that is put on some panels, not all, to harden the glass or otherwise strengthen it. And what we do with that is when we separate, like this glass right here came off our line, it's very pure glass, but it does, depending on the panel type, have some antimony in it. We are able to put this directly back into the furnace that we're going to be building to make new solar panels. And the antimony does not cause a problem with the furnace that we'll be building to make new solar panels. Now that's still 2 years out. So in the interim, what we're doing with that glass I just showed you is we're sending it to a company that basically has a process that ultimately turns it into fiberglass. And in that application, particularly once it's diluted across all of the other glass that they're using, it is, at de minimis levels, and it is perfectly safe. Like, you wouldn't want to put it in a bottle or something you're drinking from. And then with the PFAS, again, that is not on every panel. It's a relatively limited number of panels. And that goes into what we call solar plastic. And currently that's our goal is to get to zero waste, but plastics is, I'm sure you're all aware, very challenging to recycle. And particularly these kinds of plastics for that exact reason. And one thing that we have right now, so just to be totally transparent right now, that's something we are landfilling at, Republic Services, and we do not want to do that in the long run. And so we've actually started developing this really cool project that will compress our plastics into essentially, it's like a pallet, but it's called dunnage, and it's like basically 4x4s that you can stick panels on. And then we can basically take our old plastics that has that material you're talking about, but really compress it and reuse it over and over again to move panels from your warehouse or from a large solar farm to our site. So that's our vision for how to deal with the plastics in the long term. But whoever asked that question, you're not wrong. And you also didn't ask actually about the most challenging piece, which is the lead. Many older solar panels do have lead. This material right here has lead in it. In fact, one of the things that makes us unique in the solar recycling space, I think it's one of the reasons why Prologis invested in us, Microsoft invested in us, is because we have patents on making sure that lead gets completely separated. There's none of it in the glass, there's none of it in the plastic, and it all goes to a refiner that is basically, certified to deal with silver, copper, and lead, and they're extracting all those materials.
Awesome. Our next question is on hydrogen. Of course, we have to have a question on AI. We have to have a question on hydrogen. It's for Andy, for you and I. What is Prologis and Amazon doing with hydrogen? Are you looking to procure green hydrogen within the Southern California market? I can maybe take a brief stab at that. So hydrogen is going to be a really important part of our strategy overall. I think I can't say too much about exactly the role it's going to play at any which location, but we are trying to future-proof our projects to incorporate it when it is available and when it is at the right price point. So for example, in our EV charging hub that we just built in Southern California, it's being powered by linear generators that today are running on natural gas, but in the future have the flexibility to switch over to hydrogen as a clean source of fuel. And that was in direct reaction to long interconnection wait times, wanting to get the site up and running and wanting to provide the right resiliency and operational performance via the microgrid solution. So definitely an important source of fuel, evolving strategy for sure. Andy, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think you're actually more knowledgeable on hydrogen than I am. That's a teams outside of my scope.
Next question. And this is for Lindsay and Andy again, what are some effective ways to leverage change in facilities where you operate but don't outright own? And Andy, I know you're really fond of finding innovative collaboration structures, so maybe this is a good question to touch on some of those.
Yeah. Well, I think it's perfect that you're in the room because you and I have talked about this when you're the developer or landlord for us. I think it is really about, it fundamentally starts with goal alignment. That, Prologis is also a signatory of Climate Pledge, right? So when we talk about where are we trying to get in 5, 10, 15 years, it really helps that we're trying to get to the same place. So it's less about are we going to do it? Are we going to take on certain measures to get us, to decarbonize? It's more of a question of, are you going to do it or am I going to do it? And it depends. And it's that line of like, where does your scope start? Where does mine begin? Or where does your scope end? Where does mine begin? Certainly, I think, we're lucky to be working with folks like Prologis that already have standards for some of their speculative development and other properties where we don't have full control of the standards. We pursue the same measures in the scope 1, 2, and 3 reduction, energy efficiency, electrification, low carbon materials. So I think it again, it starts with that partnership and being aligned.
I love this point, Andy, and I can't agree more. And I have a feeling if there's someone out there sort of thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds great, I wish I could do it. A couple of inspiration points for you. One is, remember that if you are a tenant in a space, you are essentially the client, and there is that opportunity for you to align your values with the person that is providing that space to you. And Prologis is a great example of a company that wants to bring that service to you. And so remember that you have that buying power, and you're able to leverage and ask for what it is that you want and need out of a facility that you're operating in. The second thing is to band together, find other folks that are operating in that space or who want to operate in the markets that you're in, and use that collective voice to make sure that essentially if there is that dynamic and you're trying to find or push for landlords, let's call them, essentially that you need those folks to provide these kinds of services and facilities to you. You have more power if you can, find a few other operators, a few other folks who want to do that with you to push for that type of service to be delivered. So just remember that you have that buying power, and see what happens when you start asking the question and really asking and hoping that that type of business relationship can be achieved. There are some great resources, I will say. Green Lease Leaders, which it's a little bit different. CEBA, the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance, also has a couple of things on this. Both of those programs may be able to help you kind of navigate some of these questions, particularly if you're maybe not entirely in warehouse, but you have sort of warehouse and logistics and then other things. So there's a whole world out there of resources for people who are kind of working on that issue.
Awesome. Ray, we have time for one final question, and it was directed at you. Have you seen or considered more applications of mass timber in our sector?
Yes, and yes. So mass timber, engineered wood product that can replace concrete and steel. Their sweet spot really in terms of applications is anywhere between 2 and let's call it 25 stories tall. So vertical is a really great application of mass timber. One thing you'll notice about warehouses, especially in the US, typically only one floor. So you got to get creative when it comes to using mass timber in a warehouse. But where we've seen it most effectively used is in the roof and then in our mezzanines for the office space. It's really challenging to use it in our wall systems because mass timber is hard to weatherproof. And so what we found previously is that you have to wrap that mass timber in a metal IMP system or some sort of wrapper that typically tends to deteriorate the carbon story that comes along with using that mass timber. One fun fact I'll also mention is that in our French portfolio, glulam beams and columns are actually the standard over steel because their fire code there prefers the charring effect as opposed to the bending effect from steel. So it kind of is a perception thing, but it also, I think, is about addressing that longer tail of opportunities that I discussed earlier.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I am blown away by not only the great answers and concepts we went over today, but the really great technical detail and examples that everyone went into. So thank you very much for bringing your A game to today's panel. And with that, we are out of time. Thank you all for watching today's webinar. We did run out of time on a lot of questions, so I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all of them. I hope you still found it engaging. We certainly found your insights valuable via our polls and want to thank you for participating as well. We'll be reaching out to share the replay, and we hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone.